This episode is brought to you by Privacy. So for those that don't know by now, Privacy lets you buy things online using virtual cards instead of having to use your real ones, protecting your identity and bank info while you're online. Right now, new customers will automatically get $5 to spend on their first purchase if you go to privacy.com/barcode to sign up. So I can't tell you how long I was searching for a quick and easy yet secure service to protect my financial information if I was making an online purchase. And my main concern was the same one that you have: securing that payment info and where that payment info goes after you hit confirm purchase. Well, with Privacy, you're in control. It puts you in the driver's seat. You know, you set the speed limit. You can put that cruise control on 55 or 105. It's your call. So before you make that next online purchase, hit up privacy.com/barcode and get yourself an account with $5 to spend on your first purchase. Privacy.com/barcode.
You're listening to the Barcode Podcast with your host, Chris Glandon, serving cybersecurity straight up with no chaser. Let's hit the bar and grab a drink.
Yo, Chris, check it out. We got barcode trivia night going on. Hope you packed some popcorn. Tonight's theme is security movies. Actually, you're late, bro.
Man, I wish I knew. I actually got stuck in traffic getting over here.
Well, it's coming down to the wire. Let's go check it out.
Okay, gang. The answer to the last question. What was the first cinematic reference to a firewall? Was C, War Games? Again, C, War Games. All right, we have a close one here, guys. Here are the standings. In third place, we have Trojan Scum Riders with 40 points. In second place, we have Mind Hack Zombies with 55 points. And currently in first place with a staggering 75 points, Bootstrap Paradox. Hang tight, compadres. I will be right back with our final question of the night.
Dude, I'm a trivia beast. I would have killed this competition. I mean, Bootstrap Paradox? You serious?
I don't know, bro. You know these guys in their security movies.
True. Well, listen, man, I need a drink. Before this last question, at least I'll go 1 for 1.
Okay, cool. I got you. Quick and easy. It's called the final answer. You're going to do 1.5 ounces of white rum, ounce of maraschino liqueur, ounce of green chartreuse, and 1 ounce lemon juice. Shake, strain, straight up in a cocktail glass.
Perfect.
All righty, crew. Here comes your last question of the evening. This one here will determine tonight's winner. In the movie Identity Theft, starring Jason Bateman, they based the character Sandy Patterson after...
Gotta run, man. Here's my guy.
All right, Chris. Enjoy. I'll see you all next round.
John Sileo is CEO of the Sileo Group, a data security think tank that helps organizations protect the information that drives their profits. His experience includes engagements with the Pentagon, USA Today, Visa, 60 Minutes, Homeland Security, Anderson Cooper, Rachel Ray, Dr. Oz, and the list just goes on. A cybersecurity expert and Hall of Fame keynote speaker, John, it's an honor to have you on the show, sir. Welcome.
Chris, God, it's so good to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. So you, at one point in your life, was a victim of cybercrime, to the extent that you lost a multi-million-dollar business to cybercrime. I'd like to get into that if you don't mind, if you could just sort of walk me through that experience and how that happened.
Yeah. I was just one of those people who thought it couldn't all happen to me. I ran a technology business that I'd taken over from my family, a computer company in Denver, Colorado. And I kind of had two separate cases. So the first was this kind of, at the time, back in 2003, garden variety dumpster diving. A woman, Rosemary Serrano, stole my identity out of some unshredded trash that I put out on the curb. The night before the trash people came, and this cybercrime ring that was running in the area called the Cash Men, who dress up like trash men, drive around your neighborhood in a garbage truck, and pick up the garbage on your curb, which is actually not illegal because it's on public property at that point. They take it back to a warehouse, filter through it for identity, and sell it on the dark web. Well, in my case, this woman, Rosemary Serrano, bought herself a home using my social cross country in Boca Raton, Florida, and then drained our life savings, defaulted on the loan, and declared bankruptcy in my name. And I found out when I walked into my bank one day and security guards physically escorted me out of the bank for crimes that Rosemary had been off committing in Florida in my name. And if it all sounds vaguely familiar from the movie Identity Thief with Jason Bateman and Melissa McCarthy, that's because that movie was based on my early story with ID theft.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just such an eye opener to the personal side of it. And at the time, I didn't really apply it to the small business that I was taking over from my parents. And It turns out that while that was going on, while I was distracted and my eye was kind of off the ball, so to speak, kind of like, what it's been this last year with COVID, we've all been focused so heavily on surviving that sometimes the security went to the background. Well, in this case, I had taken on a business partner who was my best friend and my rock climbing partner, Doug. And it was to start up a kind of a early cloud version of accounting software. Well, it turns out that Doug was using my banking login credentials, my identity, to embezzle from all of our clients, fund some seriously sick habits that he had, and use my identity to cover all of his cyber crimes. So that kind of the net result of that one was that I faced a 2-year criminal trial, for 10 years in prison for all of these crimes that he had committed as if he were me. So it was ID theft, it was cybercrime, it was insider fraud. And I spent 2 years fighting that jail sentence. And, I kind of saved the ending for the audiences that I speak with. Obviously, I give a little bit longer version of the story and all the gory details, but it was quite a trial that really demonstrated it can happen to all of us. It can happen to us personally. It can happen to our businesses, and that still affects us personally. And, in this, I think the lesson for modern times is trust has really become our greatest vulnerability, whether it's the technology we trust, the people we trust, the insiders, and so forth.
That's 100% true, man. And there are bad actors out there that are highly skilled in creating trust, especially in the digital world where you don't know exactly who you're talking to.
No, with a social media profile and some basic reconnaissance techniques, you can get somebody to trust you, socially engineer them extremely quickly. And it's funny, I don't know what you see with the companies you work with, but such a small proportion of the organizations that I speak to and work with have actually done a good job of training their people on social engineering and the human elements of cybersecurity.
Exactly. And if your employees are only focused on that from 9 to 5, right? They pass that compliance training. That's a check mark for the organization. But that should really extend beyond the company walls. And that awareness needs to happen on a cultural level.
Agree totally. And the cultural aspect is such a secondary thought at most organizations. I mean, there are some that are building security into their culture by design, just like they would into their technology. But that's pretty few and far between.
So yeah, interesting story. After this happened to you, was it at that point you decided to zone in on security and decide to help educate others on how to protect their own identity?
Yeah. So, it kind of started like many of our things start, which was kind of out of fear and complete overwhelm. My wife and I, we had lost all of it. We'd lost our everything we had earned. We were going to have to move out of our house. we got in this kind of, nasty fight, and I went to the basement and I spent 3 weeks in the basement writing my first book, which was on identity theft. And the book did kind of well, and it got me out there on the road for a book tour. And it became readily apparent that organizations, even back then, just with pure ID theft, they needed to know about this stuff. And I was better on the stage than I would ever be, inside the pages of a book. And it led to this speaking career that, and the Pentagon and all this stuff, that's so fun to brag about. But the point being, we all needed this. It didn't matter what kind of organization or what individual. It's universal across all of those.
Absolutely. You need to deliver that message. But it's also, a gift that you have to be able to deliver that message that connects with people. And a lot of folks don't have that. They have the knowledge, but they can't deliver that message. And I think that's what's special about, what you do.
Well, yeah, thank you. That emotional connection to me is the missing key secret ingredient, getting people to bridge from their own personal security, like losing your identity or your privacy, to organizational security and what it means for the people at the end of that data.
You mentioned COVID and sort of this pandemic era that we're in right now. And it's really caused some shifts in many things, in typical workflows within organizations, within mindsets and strategy and how you go about things differently. And it's also affected cybersecurity spend within organizations as well. And security now, I think, is in higher demand than it ever has been, although many organizations are still left with budget fatigue and just infrastructure spend that's happened over the past year and a half trying to get, work from home environments set up properly.
Right.
I'm curious, in your opinion, could you talk to me a little bit about how to sell better? And I'm thinking in terms of selling from the perspective of CISOs who are looking to sell better to convince their board and executives of a cybersecurity initiative. And then also from the product solution sales reps who are looking to get a CISO to listen to them, to understand the value of their product.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite part of this topic, because I'm not overly technical. And by the way, neither are the CEOs or even sometimes the CISOs. They're coming from a business management type background in some cases. And I sit in on these board meetings and advise at these board meetings where the technical people are presenting the case for this. They're trying to present a business case, but what they're presenting is a data case or a technological IT case. And really what it all comes down to is what both you and I do. You do it on your podcasts. I do it on the stage. And that is tell a story. And so that, the particular model that I teach, whether it's to a security person or an IT person that needs to sell upwards, hey, here's why we need budget. Here's why this newest threat is something we have to address. Or if they sell downwards, which means they have to train the people below them and get them to engage and care about it. Or to the product sales rep who is, repping endpoint software or insider detection software, whatever it might be. Utilizing story is so important. I mean, think about it. Since the beginning of time, story has followed the basic same framework. And that framework is understood by everybody in your audience. And it doesn't matter who the audience is because we've all seen a movie, we've read a book, an article, and it follows this framework. You have a hero of some sort who has something of high value that's at stake, but it lives in a risky setting of some forth. And that allows an adversary of some type to attack. And in general, that leads in the story to a defeat. Now, it's that point in the story that a wise guide comes along. They share an action plan, and that action plan leads to victory. That is how, from Homer through current times, that is the basic framework of a story. I mean, if you take a look at, at Rocky 3, which is the quintessential storyline, it follows that perfectly. You've got Rocky Balboa, who has got something at stake, which is the heavyweight title in Rocky 3, but he's living in a setting where he's grown soft. He's no longer practicing like he used to. That allows Clubber Lang, Mr. T, you'll remember, to, intimidate him verbally and on the ropes to the point where Rocky is defeated. That's the point at which Apollo Creed, his former enemy, comes into the picture as his coach. They form an action plan. We all remember it. It's Eye of the Tiger. They're going to work as hard as when Rocky defeated Apollo, and that leads to victory. So that overall structure, it's kind of a 9-point structure that, by the way, you can structure every single cybersecurity initiative by. And when you do it in that way, it's super easy for people to conceptualize and remember. But here's the problem. Most organizations jump into the story at the defeat at the 6th stage or in the end of the 2nd act. So they have a defeat, like let's say Colonial. They get hit by ransomware, and then we find out all of the known vulnerabilities and issues that they could have solved to not have this problem. Well, if you move the defeat and the guide and the action plan to the start of the story, and you tell it in such a way, for example, if you're the CISO and you're looking for budget, and you talk about the defeat of some sort of analogous company. So a company like yours that has been hit by ransomware, if you're a financial company, maybe it's CNA Financial, and the ransom there that they paid was 40 million. If you're a hardware company, you use Apple, the ransom there was 50 million. So you're giving a defeat, but it's not your defeat. You've moved that to the start in the story position. And then you move through. The hero is not the data. Most organizations are looking at most IT and security people look at the data as what they're trying to save. It's actually business outcomes that they're trying to get at. And what's at stake are these activities that lead them to these outcomes. So you're kind of rearranging the story. The big point here is it's a victory narrative. You're going from defeat at one end through an arc that you're showing in a very clear pattern what the plan is to a victory. And that kind of overarching 2-step process is what executives, employees, everybody at every level, non-technical, can identify with.
I love that you shared that. And it seems like a very proven approach. And I love the Rocky comparison on many levels. Number one, I'm Philly. So, that's one movie that I can relate to. And then second, next time I walk into a boardroom, I'm playing that the Eye of the Tiger as my walk-in music just to get me pumped up.
No doubt. best pump up ever, right?
Right. Get you in the right mindset. No, that does make sense though. You kind of lay it out like a movie plot, and that really gets people thinking versus, I need X amount of dollars for X product.
Yeah, and it's a very effective way to break down any threat too. I mean, it's not just powerful from the story side, it's powerful from the analysis side and forces you to look at, hey, what is our setting? Well, the setting recently has changed from the fortress moat model. We have kept all the data in the castle and surrounded it with all kinds of security. And then we had COVID and we all went remote. And now it's the, dispersed kingdom model or whatever you want to call it. And okay, I need to take a look at the setting that this threat exists in. And who is the adversary? Is it Russia? Is it ransomware? Is it whatever? Mm-hmm. And it just is a very orderly way to look through every step of the cyber process.
Yeah. How important is it that a CISO or executive does have technical acumen? And what would you think to what degree? Is it good to have a technical background and understanding some of that terminology? Or do you think that the understanding of leadership, understanding of strategy is more important?
I think it's a bit of both. Ultimately, you have this organization, for most organizations, because you're trying to make a profit or deliver some sort of a service. So in the end, if you don't have a business perspective, a holistic perspective on, hey, this is about the bottom line. That means we have to balance security with convenience, with deliverability. So it's both. But here's what I've learned. The best security professionals at a high level that I know started one way or the other. So they started in business and they got more technical, or they started technically and they got more business background, but they had a curiosity about the other side of the equation. And when I'm in, speaking with a room full of business executives, I'm giving them a framework and a way of thinking that lets them have the conversation without thinking that they have to know everything. And that comes down to, what are the right questions to ask? What do we need to ask about our incident response plan? What does that mean? What are we prepared for? What is zero trust architecture? Give me an overview. Give me a metaphor for zero trust so that I understand it and can ask the right questions. But in terms of understanding the nitty gritty, to me, if you're on a staff with others beneath you, that's something that you have other people that they do the deep dive on that. At smaller companies, of course, it tends to be one person.
Agreed. How would you advise those in leadership positions to stay fresh on emerging technology and emerging threats so they are still informed?
Well, the self-serving answer is to, bring me in for a speech and
yes.
Once a year, have me give you the update or whatever. And
sure.
But the more generous answer is I would read at a high level. So I've got 4 or 5 sources that even I go to that I trust, right? Since trust is such a big deal, that don't over dramatize the threats. They just analyze them. So, even something like the Wall Street Journal cybersecurity newsletter, the Washington Post has a threat newsletter that goes out. Those type of things to keep on top of, oh my gosh, JBS, the meatpacking company, just paid $11 million ransom, and here's what they didn't do. Or Colonial Pipeline paid $4.4 million, all because of a single bad password that wasn't caught, that wasn't decommissioned after somebody left the company. That level to me is what I would do. I probably spend 2 to 3 hours a day myself reading and keeping up. But for leadership, this isn't for the IT people who are constantly doing coursework and so forth, but for the leadership level, I would say, once a week, going through and reading top level, those type of issues. And then frankly, going to their security people and talking to them about the threat. What are we doing about supply chain? Do we have SolarWinds installed? I mean, the questions don't have to be sophisticated to be effective to get the people beneath to take a look at that.
It's hard to escape that as well. These ransomware attacks are, they're hitting mainstream news now. There's really no way to miss it. And those are things that you need to think about when you go back to your organization. Are these things that we have in place? Could we be next?
Absolutely. And I think what a lot of corporations have seen as a byproduct of COVID is, I better get involved. I better get my fingers into this, get my hands a little dirty, understand what's going on, because as we move to a more remote world, more virtual, more online world, putting stuff in the cloud, using devices, allowing devices into the organization, partnering with vendors online, all of those things, you better understand it at an executive level, or you're going to have you're going to get eaten.
100%. So I want to stay on the topic of trust for a moment. And you mentioned zero trust, which is, very buzzword. Like everyone likes to throw the word zero trust out there. And there's a lot of confusion around the term. I think it gets overused in situations where it's not relevant. What is your take on the term zero trust, and then also on the concept of zero trust?
Yeah. So the term itself to me is cultural suicide. When you inside of an organization promote the fact that we're going to have zero trust, your people think that you don't trust them, that you won't trust them, that you're going to be Big Brother looking over their shoulder, monitoring everything that they do. And so what we found, what they do is they use shadow computing. They send stuff to themselves on a different computer. They plug a USB device in. They put it in their Dropbox and pick it up elsewhere. They don't want you watching everything. And then what the tech people do is, oh my God, they're abusing this, and they lock down further. And just by the term zero trust, you have built in a lack of trust inside of the organization. And I have seen this happen in person, that, the security people get all excited about introducing zero trust architecture, and it completely destroys the culture of security that they have built. So a couple things. I'll talk in a second about how I'd replace that with the concept of deep trust, which is my own concept. But first, you got to know zero trust, oftentimes it's seen as a product, like you can buy this off the shelf. No way. This is a strategy. This is a quilt work of all kinds of people, processes, technology, oversight, and so forth. It is not something you buy off the shelf. So if a vendor says, here's the product that you need, rather than asking what data do you want to protect, that you're getting a line of bull. Zero trust doesn't make a system trusted. It's not about that. It's not that the system is trusted. It's about constantly re-verifying, people. And I'll give my definition of deep trust in a second. And it's not a silver bullet. It's being sold now as like the cure-all Rosetta Stone. And it's like many other things, which is the criminals will find ways around zero trust. They always find a way around whatever we build. So think of it as a dynamic, organic process, not as something you do all at once. It's an incremental, phase it in over time. Start with your low risk data first, because you actually have a lot to learn before you do this to the crown jewels. And build it up from the bottom. And here's how I define deep trust. It's the taking all of the steps that you need in order for people to trust that the data is safe, to trust it as a corporate unit. So you're defining who you trust, individual users, with just the right amount of access to the crown jewels, the prioritized top business outcome data, systems, and so forth. The crown jewels using only approved devices under the right conditions. Is this person still employed? Are they in the same job? Did they get more access or less? The right conditions with consistent oversight. So that's something that's not included in most definitions of zero trust. Mm-hmm. Consistent oversight to achieve a stakes-based outcome, while building defeat-ready resiliency into the plan. So those three last ones, oversight, outcome, and resiliency, are often left off of the deep trust. And here's where that fails. A lot of the crime that we're seeing now is insider in nature. It's somebody who has gotten into the business. Well, just take my example. Doug, my business partner, had access. So we trusted him. He had access. He knew what the crown jewels were. He could work on any device he wanted because he was a co-owner under any condition, at home, at work, on the road. So none of those, that's zero trust right there. None of those would have stopped my case. The consistent oversight absolutely would have done that. That's where I failed, was taking a look at what data was coming and going and how it was working. And we did not have that in place. And we certainly didn't have a resiliency plan in place to say what happens if this data goes missing. So that concept of, hey, we're going to take a look, a very defined look at what data goes to who and how it's used. And then we're going to have some oversight and some backup plans. That to me is how you build deep trust. And it is not an overnight purchase.
Copyright that. Deep trust. Yeah. I love that. It's a control stack, but you also have that oversight that's crucial for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I can't tell you the number of meetings I sit in, when I'm advising clients and they're thinking of going to this, and the vendors at the table and even the security team internal have been convinced that two-factor authentication and, identity management are the same as zero trust.
Right.
And they're not. They're 1/8 of this formula that I've put through. That's a really important part, but it doesn't do anything if you don't have the person that configures it right for the correct person inside of the organization on the data that you actually want to protect, not the marketing data that you don't care if it's out there on devices that are, approved. I mean, you can see those layers as you talk about them that so often get skipped just because people want a simple answer.
Yeah. I guess you would say it's a framework versus a solution.
Exactly.
Got it. So, John, what's next for you? I know we're sort of in the last phase of the pandemic. Do you have any upcoming speaking engagements or events that we should be aware of?
Oh, gosh, I have got, I just finished the Eastern Iowa Security Conference in Cedar Rapids, which was awesome.
Nice.
I head to Amazon shortly. I've got everything from the $1 million roundtable, which is top financial performers. Most of my events are closed events because we're talking about very confidential, specific stuff. So, even when it's 5,000 people in Vegas or 5 people sitting around a boardroom table, it's not something that are open. I work with individual associations, organizations, governmental entities, and so forth. What I do individually is I run retreats up in my a little spot that I've got in Breckenridge, Colorado, up in Summit County, and I run specifically retreats for burned out teams. And in cybersecurity, there is so much burnout that's where a ton of the mistakes are happening because the security team has been working for the last 18 months to go to work from home. And now they're being asked to go to hybrid, which is even more complex. And the team needs a break. They need to learn to slow down, to refocus, and doing those small type events for companies and for groups of CISOs and so forth. That is what I love because we get to go deep. We get to take a deep breath. We get to fly fish or ski or relax and get some work done. That's really, really motivating for me.
How about craft cocktails? Is that part of that retreat as well? Because if so, I might need to fly out there.
Man, you know my weakness there. So yeah, mixing craft cocktails and then drinking them is one of my great hobbies. I love that. So what a perfect, Barcode podcast. What a perfect place for us to meet.
Absolutely, man. What are your favorites? What are your go-tos lately?
So I'm a bourbon guy at heart. That's like where my center is. So
Same
things
here.
like really interesting but subtle takes on old fashions, like one that I made up, and I'm sure every one of these exists elsewhere. I call the London Foggy, which if you've ever had a London Fog at Starbucks, it's Earl Grey tea. So I just do an Earl Grey latte, old fashioned that I love, or I'll do one with, chai tea or just subtle little flavors that you add into a drink that's already killer good.
So you're sort of a mixologist on the side too, then.
Yeah, you bet.
Nice. Now, are these iced beverages?
These are always iced. Well,
okay.
Yeah, mostly iced. Sometimes I do, I live in Colorado, it gets cold. So I do a lot of coffee and hot chocolate beverages. I do umbrella drinks in the summer. So really, I'll do anything. I'll take anybody's good recipe and tinker with it.
There you go, man. I know.
What's your favorite?
I go straight bourbon, and I'd say Blanton's is still my number one choice. I don't go too top shelf because I don't see the need to. I'll typically tap out at like a $60 bottle. And to be honest with you, a $60 bottle of, say, Woodford Reserve Double Oak is just as good as the really high end ones. So
at my last retreat this was cyber leaders who also loved bourbon and mountain biking. So it was a very specific retreat. And at that retreat, I had 6 bourbons that ranged from $20 a bottle. It was like Maker's Mark to $180 a bottle. And they tasted them all. We had a tasting and rated them. And not one person could pick the top dollar one, and over half of them picked, closer to like 2/3, picked the bottom two as their favorites when it was a blind taste testing. So it's so interesting. I think, branding and status has a lot to do with it. But I agree with you that over $60, a good bottle of like Angel's Envy, which is aged in port casks. And I love it for that little finish that it's got. Like beyond that, I have no capability to tell. And sometimes I pick the $15 bourbon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just got into peanut butter whiskey. I don't know if you've had that yet. Yeah, there's one out there called Screwball.
All right.
And Screwball is phenomenal. It tastes like liquid peanut butter.
Oh my God, I got to try that. No, I love PB&J sandwiches. So.
Oh, well, then what you do is you take Screwball and you put a splash of cranberry in, and it's a peanut butter and jelly.
Oh my God. All right. That's tonight's drink.
There you go. And then how about venues? You're out in the Colorado area, it's, but you go everywhere. You travel, like you mentioned, speaking engagements all over the world. So, where have you landed that had a really cool and unique bar? And could you describe it for us?
Oh God, every place I go has a great joint, but you have to ask locals. Like you can't find it generally in the books because then it's, just touristy. So in Denver, the one that is like you got to go to when you come is Death & Co. And it's a couple of guys. I think they started in New York. They came to Denver. They invent all of these drinks. They've got books on it. And you just ask the bartender for like, fix me your specialty, and she'll whip you up something. And then, I just love international pub scenes because they're part of the culture. Unlike here where you kind of go to drink or to eat, there you go to meet. So tiny town in Dunedin, New Zealand has a place that it used to be called the Albert Arms. It's now called the Bog. But, they got Irish music playing in the background. They've got only 3 or 4 beers on tap, a couple of whiskeys, and, you don't have a ton of selection, but everybody and they welcome you. And probably any place in Europe, you go to Ravello, Italy, and you're having an Aperol. I don't even like, a spritz. And yet you're sitting in that setting and having what they're drinking. And it's just such an amazing life experience. It's almost more, it's not as much about the drink as it is about the life experience.
So if you go somewhere you don't know, ask the locals.
Ask the locals. God, yes.
Yeah. Very cool, man. Well, it's last call here. So do you have time for one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you decided to open up a cybersecurity themed bar, what would the name be? And what would your signature drink be called?
Oh my God. Okay. Cybersecurity themed bar. Well, there's this place in Portsmouth, England that is called the Jolly Taxpayer that I just think is one of the greatest. They have such great pub names. They don't take themselves too seriously. So I'd probably make it something like the Jolly Honeypot or something where, so it's got a little tinge of cyber, it's kind of where everyone is welcome, but the evil never leave or something like that.
Yes. I love that. And it's a honeypot. So you got to make it in a way where someone's walking by, they get trapped.
Exactly.
How about a drink?
If it was cyber themed bar, I'd go for something that was a tribute to all of the people out there who work so hard to protect us, kind of the white hats, the security people. I think they get underrepresented, celebrated. So maybe it'd be like the toasted white hat or something. It'd be, 3 parts coffee because these people have to stay awake at all hours. It'd be 1 part Ferretti Biscotti liqueur to keep them happy while they're doing the job. And then, a little cap of toasted marshmallows on the top to, to pay homage to all these white hats that do so much for us.
Not only taste good, also functional.
You bet.
Love it. How can our listeners connect with you online? Do you have your social media footprint? Are you on LinkedIn? Twitter? How can our listeners reach out?
Yeah. So, most basic is just my website, which is my last name, Sileo, SILEO.com. And then I'm on all the platforms. Well, I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm not much of an Instagram user or Snapchat, but Facebook, if you just, put in my name, you'll see me there. LinkedIn is probably what I do most aggressively. That's where I connect with clients and future clients. So that's a great place. If, let me know, jot me a note, because I get a decent number of requests. Jot me a note that you heard me on Barcode Podcast, and I'll connect with you. And you can also just Google me and find all those different sources. They come up pretty high.
Cool, man. I'll get the links on the site as well. So, John, thanks, man. You take care. Be safe.
It's a pleasure. Cheers.
Barcode patrons, if you like this episode and would like to support the podcast, rate us on Apple Podcasts and visit our Patreon site, patreon.com/Barcode Podcast. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, check out the barcodepodcast.com/sponsor. Cheers.
Unfortunately, it's time to shut the bar down for this episode. Thanks for stopping in. See you next time. We'll save you a seat. Be sure to check us out at thebarcodepodcast.com.